Yeah. My dad is currently in the diaconate, and if I'm not mistaken, he'll totally correct me if I'm wrong when he hears this, but I'm pretty sure he practices Ignatian spirituality, and he was describing to me one time about how it works. He was like, "Yeah, I've heard of that. How does it work? What do you do?" He's like, "Well." And this might be a facet we could dive into, but so it's not just the contemplative piece where it's okay, let's be conscious of where God it might be operating, where we're finding His love, Him working with us, and where the good is in the world and in our life, which is an amazing piece. But then also the scriptural piece, the studying piece. And so he was describing it to me where it was, well, you have your scripture readings for the day, and you read a passage of scripture, and you find one thing that sticks out to you from the scripture, and then you meditate on it right then and there. And then you just sit there in quiet, contemplative meditation on that particular scripture to see what God is trying to tell you. And while you're doing that, you're being completely aware of your surroundings. So you're looking at what's happening around you and that sort of thing. Is that another aspect to it? How does, tell me a little bit about that? Because first of all, when I first heard it, I was like, that's really actually a phenomenal way to reflect on the scriptures. So it really moved me when I heard it. What about you on that end?
So most Ignatian people would refer to that as imaginative prayer.
Yeah.
To where Ignatius actually challenges you to see yourself in that moment. So there are times, one of Ignatius's his most famous work for sure is the spiritual exercises, which we can dive into that, where it's a 30-day retreat that you take. One of the things that comes from that is he teaches people to pray and use their imagination. So when you're thinking about the nativity, you pray and imagine that you're there. And you can actually pray whether you're Joseph standing in that scene, Mary, a bystander, maybe you're one of the shepherds. I guess you could be one of the cows too, right? Whatever you think it fits well for you.
Yeah.
But you actually put yourself into that scene and try to look at it from a different perspective. And it really makes it come alive. I think that you start to see scripture in a different way obviously if you're reading some of the Pauline letters and things like that, there's not much to really imagine. But especially when you're reading through the Gospels and parts of the Old Testament, you can really dive in and start to imagine being there and seeing and feeling what it was like. And how does it stir your heart? How does it stir your mind and your soul? Yeah. And that's where the difference really comes in.
I think too, I've heard it. I was doing a retreat for the Archdiocese of LA. It was like a training retreat. And one of the pieces that they had us do is they would give you a question that you were to go out, find a space, and talk to God about. And I thought it was a really powerful exercise. This was one of my first encounters with it. The question was, what is Jesus trying to do in the church today? And I remember sitting out there. My favorite thing to do when I get in these moments is I actually started doing it when I first traveled to Europe, because I go into cathedrals and these things are so grand, and this was when I was going through kind of my reversion experience. And these things are so grand. And one of my favorite things to do is go to the very top by the altar in the first pew and lay down and look up. Right? It's just, I love doing it. It's calming, and I love being on the floor. As weird as that sounds, there's a humbling aspect about making yourself at the lowest point possible. And so I'm sitting in the back. Jesus, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to do? And then I just well, maybe I'll just try this thing my dad told me. I'll just start looking at what's happening around me. And I started to see, you hear nature. I'm laying on a bench actually outside, and I see trees. And I see trees, and I'm watching the trees, and I'm just okay, what are you trying to tell me? I don't know. It's a tree. What's happening with it? And through this process, basically, however God was moving me, and the thoughts placed into my heart were that there's the trees, and then there was a patch that you could see through the trees to a blue sky. And it was as if he was telling me, at least this is what I took away from it, right, wrong, or indifferent. This is just what I was maybe he's telling me this. It was as if what Jesus is trying to do with the church is there's so much noise, which was referenced by the branches, so much noise in the church, and he's trying to show us a clear path to where he wants us, which is ultimately, in the life of grace, right? So, and that was represented by the gap that you saw through the branches to the clear, to give us clarity, right? So he's trying to get through the confusion and get us into clarity. And that was really powerful for me because I never experienced something like that or had that in that way. And it was such a practical way to kind of step back and just let your heart move the way it needed to move, and it's pretty powerful. Have you had experiences like that, or what's been some of the most powerful experiences you've had while doing this?
Well, I think when you start to even take it to that next level, you see how with that imagination, how for you it felt very real.
Yeah.
And that's the idea. That's where it becomes very practical. Is, he teaches us these ideas because, he wants you to feel it and experience it. When you start diving into it more, when I talked about doing the examine, that's one of the things that I do I'm reimagining my day a little bit. So I see those moments in my head and I can see God standing there, or Jesus usually standing right there with me. And especially during some of those really difficult times in life, when you really start to get down, to know that you can look back on the day, see Jesus standing there with you, it really kind of changes your perspective on it. But really where the final step, and we'll probably talk about this more in the next episode, but when you start talking about finding God's will and doing discernment, that's where one of the benefits of this imagination comes in, because of the fact if you start looking at two different perspectives, if you're trying to discern something in life, you can imagine, okay, this is what my life is going to be like if I choose option A, or here's what my life is going to be like if I choose option B.
Yeah.
And actually taking the time to do that's probably the most profound impact that I've had. I was once a pretty impulsive person and not good at making decisions. When I started slowing down and using some of these imagination techniques to actually say, all right, what is going to be best for my life? And seeing how it actually played out and spending time and meditating and praying on that, all of a sudden I was making decisions with a lot more clarity, where I felt like God was really leading me in a certain direction. I didn't second guess myself. And usually the results turned out pretty well.
That's incredible.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for checking out this clip from the Practical Theism podcast. If you enjoyed this clip and you want to check out the full episode, you can do so by finding it on our YouTube channel. Definitely consider subscribing and ringing that little bell so you can continue to get updates, notifications when we release new episodes and new clips just like this one. I hope to see you soon.